So I'm sure by now you've probably seen the political assassination of Kirk, a well-known right-wing figure in America, known for debating kids on college campuses. And pretty much immediately after he died, you had everyone really trying to find out who's to blame. Of course, the person who bears full responsibility is the young 22-year-old who's now being caught, who pulled the trigger. He's the one to blame. But, Ben Shapiro wasted no time going on Bill Maher's show and saying it's the left. Of course, the president of the United States saying it's Democrats and it's left-wing rhetoric. Piers Morgan wasted no time as well, of course. Before you could say DEI, he had a group of what felt like 100 people on his show, all screaming at each other, saying it's the left's fault, it's the right's fault, and people are going back and forth. And as I was reflecting on and watching all these different shows, it just reminded me of why we started the Common Sense Network. So when we started in 2017, we had sort of in the political zeitgeist at the time, conversations pretty much every day about Brexit, right? And the Brexit debate in this country, in the UK, was so politically charged. You had people calling each other enemies of the state, traitors. Of course, later on, we saw the murder of Joe Cox, who was an MP here in the UK. And the person who murdered her was actually saying using some of that language that some of your political favorites were using, traitor and enemy and stuff like that. And we just felt as though we actually needed to combat this extreme polarization we're starting to see. The whole point of democracy is this maxim, I might hate everything you stand for and you're saying, but I would fight for your right to say it. That's the kind of the gold standard of what it means to live in a liberal democracy. So following this death and this assassination, I thought it was important to just do a bit of a sense check and also think about ways to move forward and what can happen, at least in the UK, to ensure we have just a more conciliatory political landscape. For me, it's kind of interesting because we've spent the best part of the past 6-7 years trying to combat political polarization, and it seems like it's gotten worse over time. Every single day I wake up and I'm reading and consuming content around polarization, trying to get underneath what's happening. And if you're thinking about who's to blame, I think there's a few things we've got to think about. One is we've got to ask ourselves a serious question, which is our media landscape, is it fit for purpose? The fourth estate, the media is meant to be this powerful force, if you like, that holds power to account, that uncovers wrongdoing, that champions the voice of the marginalized. But I think a lot of our media outlets, at least in the UK, have been captured by the profit motive. And so the main desire they have is to make money. And as such, they figured out what makes money is inflammatory headlines, emotional manipulation, and basically pitting people against each other. That's what they've realized makes money. And so they're not motivated to curb their earning potential by reporting fairly and being balanced. Instead, they draw caricatures of both sides, knowing that if they get you angry, you're going to click, you're going to read, you're going to stay on that platform. And I mean, look at the coverage of Harry and Meghan and their departure from the royal family. You've got GB News pretty much every single day pumping out news, right? Just trying to inflame people and get them angry, because negative emotion is a greater driver to read and to consume content than positive. So they've figured that out, and that's a big question we have to ask here. Now you might be saying, oh yeah, these mainstream media outlets, I think it cuts even further than that. I think all the new media, the kind of podcast culture and the podcast sort of landscape, and the kind of sort of independent journalists, they fall into the same trap, right? In fact, I think the temptation is even greater there, right? Because you've got people who are trying to make a name for themselves. How do you make a name for yourselves? Well, you say inflammatory things. In an ironic way, this is one of the things Charlie Kirk was known for, was saying inflammatory things, riling up an audience, saying things that makes you go, oh, like kind of using that shock factor. And of course, I mean, he had 4.5 million followers. Turning Point USA, his organization, was a massive organization, known all across the country. So we everyone who is a media sort of creator, someone who sort of journalist, all of us who work in media need to ask ourselves, to what degree are we actually exacerbating this problem by continuing to contribute pieces to the ecosystem that further drives and plays on people's most extreme tendencies. That's a really key thing to talk about. The second thing is to really think about to what degree you're part of an echo chamber. Because as well as his murder was horrific, what was for me equally horrific was some people's reaction to it, right? People celebrating his death, dancing, people so intolerant that the sheer arrogance of some people that they can't even conceive of someone having a different opinion to them on abortion or on DEI. I mean, it's possible for people to have different perspectives. But when you live in an echo chamber, and you've been in an echo chamber for a while, I mean, just to explain what an echo chamber is, it's basically a space where, I mean, just think about the term. When you say something and you have it reverberates, it comes back to you, basically, it echoes back to you. And when you live in a space where you follow people who agree with you, you have food with people who agree with you, you spend all your time with people who agree with you, you're very used to being in a space where what you say is gospel and what you say is good and everyone's always cheering you on for your perspective. And whilst you keep staying in that echo chamber, you're increasingly untethered from reality and you're just not connected to where real people are at. Because the reality is, if you have a job, if you polled everyone in your workspaces, you'll find people have a very mixed set of beliefs. You might have a Christian that's a libertarian that cares deeply about poverty and homelessness, but also believes in capitalism. You know, you've got this mixture of beliefs. This is what human beings are like. But when you self-select what you consume, and you consume a very narrow bandwidth of opinions, it actually makes you more intolerant as time goes on. You're shocked when someone says they're right wing. You start to demonize the other side. You start to make caricatures of the other side. You start to strawman their arguments. By the way, I'm not saying Charlie Kirk wasn't guilty of some of these things. I think he was actually guilty of some of these things. But you see where the problem lies. Echo chambers are so dangerous because they dehumanize people who disagree with you, because you don't give them the full permission to express a complex set of beliefs. You've been trained to think very narrowly, very acutely, and to demonize the other side. So those for me are serious problems. The mainstream media, echo chambers. Now, there's something to be said about political violence and the sort of all or nothing, way in which we practice politics today, where if one party wins, then they're in charge, and the other party is the loser for 5 years or however long the term is. There was a time where even if the other party won, they would still try and govern for the whole of the country. Right? So in America, when Obama won, you'd say, I'm the president for red states and blue states, and so I want to serve everybody, but not have a group of losers on the side who now have to wait their turn. That all or nothing way of doing politics, it breeds resentment, especially when your party's out for 8 years, say, or for a really long time. And it's not healthy. It's not healthy. There's more to life than just your political perspective and opinion, and we need to kind of give people the sort of permission to express themselves in various ways, not just in who they vote for to be president or to be prime minister or to be your local MP. So how do we solve this? What are some of the ways we can try to combat this issue so we see less political violence and maybe start to heal the societal fabric that's so torn? Well, one, we need leadership. There's a crisis of leadership. The statement or what Donald Trump said is ridiculous, right? Because what you need to be doing is calling for a lowering of the political temperature, not blaming a side. What we need to see, because we have riots here, we have marches here in the UK and counter riots, is, I would love to see all the major party leaders, and Nigel Farage, all come together, put out a joint statement, do a conversation, whatever it is, just calling for the political temperature to be lowered, saying, guys, we're all pulling in the same direction here. We want to make our country better. We have different perspectives on how to get there and how quickly to pull and how hard to tug, but we are all pulling in the same direction. We need that. And unfortunately, there is no political leadership right now. Folks are ginning this up. They're seeing how they can use this for their own good. So without strong political leadership, I'm afraid some of these things may continue. 2, we need better education. we do a bunch of workshops that we used to do a lot more of, where we go to local schools and we go to secondary schools, and we basically teach young people how to be media literate, because there's a lot of news media illiteracy, right? People don't know how to spot fake news, how to spot emotional manipulation, how to see that a news outlet is trying to use their emotions to get them to hate the other side. They don't understand how filter bubbles work. They don't, you've got all these people who are digital natives, so they understand how to use social media, but they don't understand how it's shaping their views and perspectives. And over time, where they're having what we call homogeneous consumption, consuming content that's already consistent with their pre-existing dispositions, is actually leading them down a path where they become increasingly radicalized. So we need to kind of adopt an upstream method where we go to schools and we start training young people on, here's how to become a critical thinker. Here's how to assess what you're reading, the truth, the validity, all that sort of stuff. It's desperately needed. We absolutely need that. And I suppose a third thing we need is we need to create spaces, safe spaces, where ideas can collide, right? Whether that's events, whether it's more platforms, where there is no, we're trying to get a winner here, but we're trying to come together, maybe uncover something about what each other believe, and through doing that, strengthen our arguments, maybe lay some things down on the floor where you go, actually, I don't believe that anymore. We need safe spaces for people who have different perspectives to come together, have a fair exchange of ideas, and learn from each other. We need to stop the name calling and the villainization, and this person's Hitler, now that person's Hitler, and it's like, okay, let's just calm it down, and let's have civil, rational discussions and see where that takes us. I want to make it clear, the person that's to blame is absolutely the person who pulled the trigger. But sometimes we have to ask ourselves, to what degree are we complicit in creating this atmosphere that makes political violence more likely?